The invitation arrived on a Tuesday. Thick cream cardstock, embossed lettering, the kind of paper that costs more per sheet than my first apartment's weekly grocery budget. My mother's handwriting, or what used to be her handwriting before she hired a calligrapher for important correspondence, spelled out my name with surgical precision. Margaret Ann Coulter, not Maggie, not Mags. The full baptismal name she'd given me 34 years ago, the name she'd used when she was still proud to claim me. You are cordially invited to a family celebration dinner, Saturday, October 14th, the Oak Room, 7 p.m. Formal attire. No, love, Mom. No, we've missed you. Just the details, arranged like a legal summons. I held the card for a long time, standing in the marble foyer of the house David and I had bought 6 months ago. A house with a foyer, which still felt like a typo in my life's narrative. Through the kitchen doorway, I could hear him on a call with Singapore, his voice low and measured, the voice that had built a logistics empire from a single truck and a spreadsheet. The voice that had made my parents decide I was a gold digger before they ever shook his hand. 2 years. 2 years since I'd stood in a courthouse in Vermont with a justice of the peace, and David's college roommate as witness, wearing a white dress I'd bought that morning from a department store clearance rack. 2 years since my phone had stayed silent through what should have been the happiest day of my life. 2 years since I'd learned that unconditional love had fine print I'd never bothered to read. My mother had sent flowers the next day. White lilies. Funeral lilies. With a card. We pray you come to your senses. My father hadn't sent anything. Not even a text. And now this. A dinner. A celebration. The words sat on the page like a challenge. I found David in his study, still in his suit from the morning's meetings, loosened tie, reading glasses pushed up into his silver-brown hair. He was 41, 12 years older than me, and he'd stopped pretending he wasn't going gray around the same time he'd stopped pretending he didn't watch me sleep. Your parents, I said, dropping the invitation onto his desk. He picked it up, read it twice, set it down with the careful precision he used for contracts he didn't trust. The Oak Room, he said. That's $400 a plate. Minimum. And family celebration? I don't know what they're celebrating. My misery, probably. Or maybe Dad finally sold the lake house. David took off his glasses, rubbed the bridge of his nose. The gesture that meant he was calculating risk, running scenarios, preparing for contingencies. You don't have to go. I know. But you're going to. I sat on the edge of his desk, the mahogany still smelling faintly of the lemon oil the housekeeper used. They've had 2 years to apologize, 2 years to pick up a phone, 2 years to explain why my own father told his golf buddies I was chasing a payday. I laughed, but it came out wrong, too sharp, too practiced. You know what the worst part is? I still want them to show up. Some pathetic part of me still thinks if I just wear the right dress, say the right thing, they'll look at me and see their daughter again. Not a transaction. David stood, came around the desk, put his hands on my shoulders with the weight of someone who understood that some debts couldn't be paid with money. Then go. Wear the dress. Say the thing. His thumbs pressed into the tension at the base of my neck. But Maggie? Yeah? Don't pay for their validation, it's already bankrupt. I bought the dress on Thursday. Not because I needed it. God knows David had filled our closet with enough designer labels to open a boutique. I bought it because I needed to choose something myself. Something they hadn't approved. Something that didn't exist in their frame of reference. Emerald green. Silk that moved like water. Backless to the waist, because my mother had once told me only women with something to prove showed their backs in public. I was 34. I had everything to prove. But standing in that dressing room, the silk cool against my skin, I wasn't thinking about my mother. I was thinking about another dress, another mirror, another morning 2 years ago when I'd stood in a Burlington department store, clutching a clearance rack gown, waiting for a phone call that never came. David had wanted a wedding, a real one, with guests and a band and a cake that cost more than my car. He'd offered to fly my parents first class, to put them up at the resort, to do whatever it took to bridge a gap he didn't understand because his own parents had been dead for a decade. "They're your family," he'd said, the night I told him not to bother sending invitations. "Family doesn't boycott their daughter's wedding because they don't approve of the groom's bank account. They don't know me. They don't want to know you. They want to know your tax returns. And since you won't show them, because it's none of their business, they've decided you must be hiding something, or that I'm hiding something, that I'm pregnant, or desperate, or mentally ill." I'd laughed then, the same broken sound I'd made in the Oak Room foyer. "My mother asked if you'd proposed because you needed a green card. You're from Ohio, David. You've never left the country except for business." He'd held me that night while I cried, the way he always did, not trying to fix it, just bearing witness. And in the morning, we'd driven to the courthouse in Burlington, just the two of us and his roommate Marcus, who'd cried harder than I did when the justice pronounced us husband and wife. I'd texted my mother a photo. The three of us, me in my clearance dress, David in a suit that cost more than my annual salary, Marcus holding the bouquet I'd forgotten to throw. Asterisk married. Love you both. Wish you were here. The reply came 3 hours later. "We pray you come to your senses." Not congratulations. Not, "we're happy for you." Just prayer. Weaponized. The same prayer she'd used when I dropped out of law school to teach history. The same prayer when I moved to an apartment she called ethnic. The same prayer, always, for me to become someone else. The lilies arrived at our hotel that night. White, fragrant, funereal. David had thrown them in the hallway trash before I could stop him, but I'd saved the card, kept it in my jewelry box, next to my grandmother's pearls, a reminder of what love looked like when it came with conditions. The Oak Room occupied the penthouse of a building my father had tried to buy in 2008, back when he still had the capital to pretend he was a player in David's league. Floor-to-ceiling windows looked out over a city that had changed around him while he wasn't paying attention. Crystal chandeliers. Waiters in jackets that cost more than my monthly salary from the job I'd quit when David and I married. Not because he'd asked, but because I'd realized I was teaching history to teenagers who cared more about TikTok than the New Deal, and I had exactly one life to waste. I arrived at 6:45. Early, because punctuality had been beaten into me with the same enthusiasm my mother had applied to piano lessons and posture correction. The maitre d' recognized my name. Or rather, he recognized the Coulter name, the one that still opened doors in this city even as the fortune behind it dwindled like spring snow. "Your party is already seated, Mrs. Whitfield." Mrs. Whitfield. Not Miss Coulter. The name change my parents had refused to acknowledge, spoken aloud by a stranger in a $5,000 jacket. The private room held 20 people. 20. My parents, my brother Thomas and his wife Jennifer, my Aunt Patricia and her latest husband whose name I could never remember, cousins I hadn't seen since my grandmother's funeral, family friends who'd sent condolence cards when I'd ruined my life, but hadn't bothered with wedding wishes. And at the head of the table, my father. Robert Coulter at 68 still carried himself like a man who owned the room, even when he was renting it. Navy suit, red tie, the watch I'd given him for his 60th birthday. The last gift he'd acknowledged before I'd become persona non grata. He stood when I entered, but not quickly. Not eagerly, the way a judge stands when the condemned enters the chamber. "Margaret." Not Maggie. Never Maggie. "You came." I was invited. "Sit. We're about to begin." I counted the place settings. 20. Plus the head table arrangement that suggested someone else was expected. David's chair. Empty. Name card removed, as if his absence had been planned from the first draft of the evening. "Where's David?" I asked, though I already knew. My mother answered, her voice the same crystal pitch she'd used at charity galas and junior league meetings for 40 years. "This is a family dinner, dear. We thought it best to keep things intimate." Intimate. 20 people. No husband. I sat. The emerald silk pooled around me like armor. The waiter poured wine I didn't ask for, and I let him, because I was going to need it. The first course arrived, some kind of foam on a plate, the kind of molecular gastronomy my father pretended to understand, and the conversation flowed around me like I was a rock in a stream. Thomas talked about his promotion at the investment firm where my father had made calls on his behalf. Jennifer showed photos of their third child, the one born 3 months after my wedding. The christening my parents had flown to Colorado to attend, while my courthouse ceremony went unwatched. Aunt Patricia complained about her ex-husband's new girlfriend, who was 23, and, obviously, after his money. I caught the eye of a cousin, Rebecca maybe, who looked away quickly, as if my disgrace might be contagious. The main course came. Beef Wellington, my father's favorite. The dish my mother had spent my childhood perfecting for his business dinners. I cut into mine and found it overdone, gray where it should have been pink, and I wondered if the kitchen had made a mistake, or if this was simply what happened when you ordered nostalgia instead of food. My father waited until the plates were cleared, until the coffee arrived in cups so thin they were translucent, until every eye at the table was properly focused on the head of the family, the way they'd been trained since birth. He set down his napkin, folded it precisely, looked at me with the expression he'd once reserved for disappointing quarterly earnings. "Margaret," he said, "we're glad you came. Are you?" The question slipped out before I could catch it. Too sharp, too honest. My mother's smile tightened until I thought her face might crack. "Of course we are," my father continued, as if I hadn't spoken. "It's been 2 years. Long enough for certain passions to cool. Long enough for perspective." "Perspective," I repeated. "Yes, perspective." He leaned forward, elbows on the table, the way he'd taught me never to do. "We were concerned, Margaret. You must understand that. You were 32, teaching at a public school, and you married a man 15 years your senior with no prenuptial agreement, a man we'd never met, a man whose business practices are completely legal and extraordinarily successful," I finished. "And he's 12 years older, not 15, and I was 32, not a child. And you didn't express concern, Dad. You expressed contempt. You told people I was chasing a payday. You told Thomas not to come to my wedding. You—" My voice caught, and I hated myself for it. "You sent funeral flowers to my wedding night hotel." The table went silent. Somewhere in the kitchen, a plate broke. My father's jaw tightened. "We were protecting you." "From what? From happiness? From yourself?" The words came out louder than he'd intended, and he paused, reassembled his composure like a man rebuilding a house of cards in a windstorm. "From a mistake you were too infatuated to see, but that's in the past. You've been married 2 years now. Clearly, the arrangement has proven durable." "Durable," I said. "Like a tire. Or a contract." "Like a marriage," my mother interjected, her voice dripping with the particular venom of a woman who'd spent 35 years pretending her own marriage was anything but a business arrangement. "And since this marriage has proven so durable, we thought it was time to address certain family obligations." I looked around the table, at Thomas, who was suddenly very interested in his wine, at Jennifer, who was texting under the table, at 20 faces I'd grown up with, eaten Thanksgiving with, endured Christmas Eve services with, and who had collectively decided that my happiness was less important than their comfort. "What obligations?" I asked. My father smiled. It was not a pleasant expression. "The check, Margaret." I blinked. "What check?" "For dinner." He spread his hands, encompassing the room, the city lights, the 20 people who'd eaten and drunk and laughed at my expense. "The Oak Room isn't cheap. Your mother and I wanted to do something nice for the family, something to bring everyone together. But we're not as liquid as we once were. The lake house sale fell through. Thomas has his own expenses. And since you're married to a man of considerable means—" He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. The waiter appeared at my elbow, silent as a ghost, holding a leather folder. He placed it in front of me with the delicacy of a man delivering a death sentence. I opened it. $4,237.56. I read the number 3 times, waiting for it to change, waiting for someone to laugh, to say it was a joke, to acknowledge the absurdity of what was happening. No one did. Thomas finally looked up. "Come on, Mags. It's just dinner." "Just dinner," I repeated. "You're the one with the rich husband," Jennifer added, not looking up from her phone. "We all figured. You all figured." I stood. The emerald silk caught the light from the chandelier, and for a moment I felt like I was glowing, like I was made of something incandescent and dangerous. "Waiter," I said. He materialized instantly, professional, unjudging, the way only service industry workers can be when they've seen everything and are still surprised. "Yes, madam." "I'd like a separate check, please, for one, the field green salad and the sparkling water." "Maggie," my father started. "No." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. The word carried the weight of 2 years of silence, 2 years of unanswered calls, 2 years of white lilies and funeral cards, and a courthouse bathroom where I'd cried so hard I threw up. "You don't get to Maggie me. You lost that right when you decided my wedding was less important than your pride, when you told your friends I was a gold digger, when you sent lilies to my hotel room and called it prayer." I pulled $200 bills from my clutch. David had stuffed it there that morning. Just in case. The way he always did. The way that used to annoy me and now felt like armor. And placed them on the table. "For my salad," I said. "And a generous tip. Because unlike some people at this table, I believe in paying for services rendered." I picked up my wine glass. It was still half full, some expensive Bordeaux my father had selected to impress people who weren't me. "To family," I said. "To the people who are there when it matters. And to the ones who aren't, may they find better things to do with their time than sending bills for betrayal." I drank, set down the glass, picked up my clutch. "The rest of the check," I said to the waiter, to the room, to my father whose face had gone the color of old ash, "should be paid by the people who boycotted my wedding. They owe me considerably more than $4,000, but I'll settle for them covering their own dinner." I walked to the door. 20 people watched me go, and not one of them spoke. Not even my mother, who'd spent my entire life having the last word. At the door, I paused, looked back. "Thomas," I said. "Congratulations on the promotion. Dad must be proud. He certainly paid enough for it." Then I left. The elevator took forever. I watched the numbers descend, feeling the adrenaline drain out of me like water from a cracked glass, leaving me hollow and shaking and somehow more alive than I'd been in years. When the doors opened, David was standing in the lobby. Not in the car, not waiting outside. Standing in the marble lobby of a building his company owned, wearing the suit he'd worn to work, holding a single white rose, the kind I'd told him I hated, the kind my mother always sent. The kind that had arrived at my hotel room 2 years ago with a card full of poisoned prayer. "I wasn't sure you'd need rescuing," he said, "but I was sure you'd need someone who wasn't asking for anything." I walked into his arms. The silk of my dress whispered against his jacket, and I could feel his heart beating, steady and certain, the rhythm I'd learned to sleep to. "They wanted me to pay," I said into his shoulder. $4,000. For a dinner I didn't want, with people who didn't come to my wedding, because they thought my money, your money, made me obligated. He didn't say anything, just held me tighter. "I paid for my salad," I whispered, "and I left them with the check. And the truth." "Good," he said. "What truth?" I pulled back, looked at him, at the man my parents had never bothered to meet, never wanted to understand, never thought was good enough because he hadn't asked their permission to love me. "That love isn't a transaction," I said, "and family isn't a debt you can collect, and that I already have everything I need." He smiled, handed me the rose. "Even though you hate these?" "Especially because I hate these." I took it. crushed the petals in my fist, let them fall to the marble floor like snow. Let's go home, David. I have a better dress to change into. We walked out together into a city that didn't care about my father's approval or my mother's charity galas, or the 20 people still sitting in a penthouse, staring at a check they hadn't expected to pay. And for the first time in 2 years, I didn't look back. Part 5. The phone call. It came at 2 a.m. David was asleep, his breathing even and untroubled, the way it always was. I was awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying the evening like a film I couldn't stop watching. My father's face, my mother's silence, the precise moment when 20 people realized they'd been outmaneuvered by the daughter they'd dismissed. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. I knew who it was before I answered. Margaret. My father's voice, frayed at the edges. We need to talk. Do we? The restaurant called. They're threatening legal action. Your mother is... she's not well. The stress of being held accountable? A pause. The sound of ice in a glass. The late-night drinking he'd always pretended he didn't do. You humiliated us. No, Dad. You humiliated yourselves. I just stopped pretending I didn't notice. You could have paid. You have the money. We don't... Why don't you have the money? Another pause. Longer this time. The lake house. The sale fell through because there were issues. Liens. Your mother's spending. Thomas's tuition for business school, the one you didn't know about because we told you he got a scholarship. I sat up in bed. David stirred, reached for me in his sleep, found my hand and held it without waking. Thomas got a full ride to Wharton, I said. You told me. You showed me the letter. We showed you a letter. It wasn't... Margaret. We've made mistakes. Your mother and I. We were angry. We were scared. You were our daughter and you married a man we didn't know, a man with more money than sense, and we thought... You thought I was selling myself. We thought you were lost. I laughed. It sounded strange in the dark bedroom, foreign and broken and not entirely unhappy. And now? Now that you need $4,000 and a daughter who still answers your calls at 2 a.m, what do you think now? I think... His voice cracked. The ice again. I think we were wrong. About him. About you. About what matters. Say it. Say what? My name. The one you stopped using. A long breath. The sound of a man who'd spent 68 years being right, suddenly confronting the possibility that he wasn't. Maggie, he said. Maggie, I'm sorry. I didn't cry. I'd cried enough in courthouse bathrooms and hotel rooms and the quiet hours before dawn. But something in my chest loosened, something that had been tight for 2 years, and I realized it wasn't forgiveness. It was recognition. The sound of my father finally seeing me. I'll send the money, I said. Not because you deserve it. Because I don't want the staff at the Oak Room to suffer for your bad decisions. But Dad? Yes? Don't call me again until you're ready to meet my husband. Not his bank account. Him. David. The man who sat outside a restaurant for 3 hours because he thought I might need a ride home. The man who threw away funeral flowers because he couldn't stand to see me cry. That man. Good night, Dad. I hung up. Set the phone on the nightstand. Lay back down in the dark, David's hand still holding mine, his breathing unchanged, his presence absolute. You're awake, I whispered. Always, he murmured, not opening his eyes. When you need me. I sent them the money. I know, I heard. Are you disappointed? He rolled toward me, opened his eyes, looked at me with the steady gaze that had made me say yes in a Burlington courthouse, that had made me believe in permanence, that had made me understand that love wasn't something you inherited. It was something you chose, every day, with intention. No, he said. I'm proud. You paid for your salad, you made your point, and then you showed them what family actually looks like, even when they don't deserve it. Especially when they don't deserve it. He kissed my forehead, pulled me close, and I fell asleep to the sound of his heart, beating like a promise I was finally ready to believe. Dash 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 hash. Part 6. 1 year later. The invitation arrived on a Thursday. Plain white envelope. My mother's handwriting. Her real handwriting. Shaky but legible. The calligrapher long dismissed. Maggie and David, we would be honored if you would join us for Thanksgiving dinner. Small gathering. Just family. No celebrations. No obligations. Just us. Love, Mom and Dad. I showed it to David at breakfast. He read it twice, set it down with the careful precision he used for contracts he was considering. What do you think? He asked. I think. I paused. Took a breath. I think they finally understand that I'm not a transaction, and I'm not sure what to do with that. Go, he said. Or don't. But Maggie? Yeah? Wear the green dress, the one that makes you feel like armor. Because family is always a battlefield, even when they're trying. I smiled, picked up the invitation, ran my finger over my mother's handwriting, the same hand that had written prayers and judgments and, finally, an apology without words. David? Yeah? Thank you. For waiting. For sitting in lobbies. For knowing when to hold roses and when to let them fall. He took my hand, kissed my knuckles. The same gesture he'd made in a courthouse, in a hotel room, in 1,000 quiet moments when words weren't enough. I didn't wait, he said. I chose. Every day. Just like you. And together, we chose again.